Lemire. Amy was designated as a certified speaking professional in March of 2023 after delivering over 300 hours of training in speaking. She is a Vistage certified speaker, distinguished Toastmaster, past president of the National Speakers Association St. Louis chapter. She's also part of our NSA Illinois family, past board member. She is incidentally one of the very first persons that I met when I joined NSA Illinois in 2014, I believe. And so she's just somebody that I have long associated with the NSA family. When she's not working, you can find her at a professional development workshop, local rock concert, or at home with her husband Nigel and her cat Brianna. I would like to welcome to our virtual stage, ladies and gentlemen, give a little NSA welcome to Amy Lemire.
Thank you, Chris, for the introduction, and thank you, NSA, for the invitation to join all of you today. And most importantly, thank you to everyone that is here right now, because it's no secret there are so many other places we could be right now. There are so many other things we could be doing right now, but you have made the investment today to invest in yourself, your skills, and your business. And for that, I want you to know I honor you and I acknowledge you for that. How many of you would like to create consistent cash flow in your business? Raise your hand. Okay, excellent. And how many of you have ever experienced roller coaster revenue in your business? Anyone besides me? Okay, great. The purpose of this workshop today is we are going to talk about how you can accelerate your sales, elevate your performance, and amplify your success with something that I call the Sales Confidence Code. Now, the way that we're going to go about this workshop today is, first of all, if everyone's okay with it, I'm going to share a little bit about my backstory, because I did not wake up one day and become a sales hero. It was quite a journey to get there. And what I've done is I've broken down this talk today into 4 key areas of focus. Number 1, we are going to focus on what I call the Sales Confidence Code. Habits that will help me sell more is what that's all about. The second thing that we're going to talk about is a sales process that I created that is pretty simple. It's only 5 steps that has led to success in my business, in sales, and also as a speaker. Number 4, we are going to talk about conversation starters. What do I say when I get on the phone? What do I say when I send that email? What do I text when I send that text that's going to get someone's attention? And then last but not least, we will be talking about how to handle objections. Now, I also have some bonus content for you. So at the break, Chris is going to be sharing a Talkadot survey. For those of you that don't know what it is, simply, I will be asking you for some feedback, because I'm always looking to get better as a speaker. And then if you answer a few questions, most of the content I'm going to be talking about today will be in that bonus. And I also included 6 steps to accelerate your sales confidence. Before we go any further, I would love to know a little bit more about all of you. My business model today is, if I put it in order of my revenue, number 1, I'm a sales facilitator, corporate consultant. Number 2, speaking. And then number 3, success habits and sales habits coaching. So I would love to see in the chat, if you could please share with me, what is your focus? Are you a keynote speaker? Are you a consultant? Are you someone in sales that happened to jump on this webinar? Are you someone that does something I haven't mentioned yet? So I'm just going to take a look so I can see what we have and who we have in the audience. Okay, so we've got coaching, speaking, speaking trainer, speaker. Okay. Keynote speaking, workshops, corporate entertainment, blended digital course creation. Wow. Training and speaking, 100% commission, insurance sales rep. Awesome. Okay, great. You're in the right place. Sales speaker, coach, performer, trainer, speaker, workshop leader, keynote, coaching, author, soon to be speaker, advisor, career coach, workshop author. And we've got more consultants, speakers, coaches. consultants, keynotes. Okay, looking down the list here. Okay, excellent. Well, the elephant in the room that I want to address before I share a little bit about my story about how I got from where I was to where I am today is that when I was planning this talk, I was talking to Chris and I was thinking to myself, most of my background has been sales and sales training. So I literally spent half my life. I know, yeah, I started when I was 2. I spent half my life in frontline sales, mostly medical supplies and medical equipment. And then I spent a lot of my life in corporate sales training. And I tried to put a parallel between I'm speaking to NSA Illinois, sales is my background, sales training is my background. How do I parallel it to speaking? And the way that I want you to think about this today is this. Whether you are a speaker, a consultant, a trainer, a frontline sales professional, one thing that we all have in common is we sell to survive. Our businesses, no matter what business we're in, sales is the lifeblood of our business. So I want you to really think about that's the reason that I'm here today to share a little bit about, okay, how did I go from 0 to sales hero? Now, before we go there, the way my journey started was back in about 2016, and I remember it just like it was yesterday. It was a very, very rainy afternoon, and I was at Brookfield Zoo outside of Chicago. And at that point in my life, I had lived in the Chicagoland area for, oh boy, just probably been about 10 years. I was there 2005, got married, moved up to the northwestern suburbs. And I had heard about this event called NSA from Patricia Fripp. She was the speaker at the Chicago Toastmasters Conference. And she said, hey, have you ever looked at NSA? You should really check this out. And I thought, okay, why not? So I went to this NSA meeting, and guess who was speaking? None other than Chris Carter. So Chris was on the stage, and then sitting next to me to my right was the one and only Sima Dahl, who I see her in the conference, in the notes, the comments, sorry. And I remember going into that meeting and feeling like I was at home. At that point in my career, I was a full-time sales trainer and I was really loving what I did, but I had this bigger vision of I really want to somehow go out and be my own boss. And I didn't know how to do it. So I joined NSA and then I joined Speakers Academy. And everything always comes down to one pivotal moment. So what really pushed me over the edge to start my business? Ironically, it was an argument. So I was at the national sales meeting for the company I was working at, and I was really at my, when you're at that breaking point where you're about to just say, I've had enough of this, but you still continue to go through the motions, whether it's a job or a relationship or some commitment you have. And I remember being really frustrated because my boss and I were just doing this. She was the director of sales training. And I remember the morning I was putting folders on tables at a national sales meeting breakout session. And she came over to me and told me that I was not putting the folders in the right place. And I completely came unglued. With about 10 people standing around us, I said to her, this whole session is just a disaster. Why do the folders even matter? And I stood there and everybody was like looking at me and jaws were dropping. And I remember going up to my hotel room and thinking, I'm going to get fired and my career is over. So I talked to my coach. I recommend everybody has a coach. I had a coach and she said, Amy, you got 3 choices. You either walk out and go on a plane and go home. You either come up with a way to make it work and stay there, or you set a date that you want to quit the job. I did exactly that. I set a date to quit my job within January of that year, and lo and behold, I did just that. Now, fast forward a few years later, the second big imitation for me is that what happened next is in 2021, I took some time and I decided to go back to work in corporate America again as a sales trainer. I just gotten divorced. I just left NSA, Illinois. I had just moved back to St. Louis. It was 2019 before the pandemic. And I started coaching and doing coaching groups. I got certified in something called thought habits. And I had another vision again to quit my job. So I quit my job, went back to work for a company, and then wanted to quit again. And really what happened is I saw another vision. What happened is I began to really have this vision again that I want to do this. And I did exactly that. I went to Michelle Villalobos's weekend program, which was all about the big back end. And then I saw a bigger vision for myself. So when I first quit my job in 2021, I then worked with her for 3 years as my coach, and I was in her inner circle. So again, it all comes back to a message. Having coaches, having mentors, having people that help you get from where you are to where you want to be is really important. So when I finally decided to quit my job, it was November of 2021, and I have been working for myself ever since, but it has not always been rainbows and unicorns. I'll tell you all that my first year working for myself, it was excellent. I made great money. I was really happy. The company I worked for hired me. They hired me back in, and they were my first corporate consulting client for sales training. But then came the next year, and I began to realize I only really had this one big client. I was doing weekend retreats on success habits, and then I was also trying to focus on getting more corporate clients. And then came last year. Last year started off really well, and I'm going to be totally transparent. Midway through the year, it began to be a dumpster fire. I could not figure out what was not working. I was frustrated. I was angry. And then sadly, my executive assistant and friend of 15 years, Michelle Hood, passed away in the middle of all of it. Now, this is where I get into why what we do is so important, because I remember at that point I had to make some tough decisions. The biggest decision I had to make first, and this is my first invitation to everybody, is have one target market. I had been trying to do weekend workshops and programs. I was doing group coaching on success habits. I was trying to get more business in corporate America, and I was doing this and I didn't realize it. So the first invitation is this, and it is to choose one lane. As we say in Speakers Academy, niches lead to riches. So last quarter of last year, I made a decision that I'm going to mostly make my number one focus be corporate sales training, speaking, and consulting. And I'll still do my coaching, but I'm only going to do 2 virtual programs a year on my success habits. So from all of that being said, what I've been able to do since then and how I got out of that like rock bottom to where I am right now is I went back to the fundamentals that I'm going to share with all of you today. When I first met with Chris, I had a list of 10 ideas and we narrowed it down to 4. So these are really the 4 most important elements that have helped me get from being in that rock bottom place of not knowing what to do, revenue down, no focus, no vision, really no direction, to where I am today. And I'll just share with all of you, not to toot my horn too much, but this year I'm already on track to exceed last year. And I'll talk more about how I'm doing that without getting into all the numbers. So number 1, I'm going to share with you this first piece today. And this idea is called the Sales Confidence Code. How did I create this? This is the 6 success habits that I believe it takes to be great in sales. And part of how I found this out is if you think about a bicycle has 2 wheels on it, okay? There's a front wheel and then there's a back wheel. So to be successful as a speaker, consultant, entrepreneur, sales professional, what do we need first? We need skills, and we need to know our product, our service. We need to know our talk really well. But then the back part is our thought habits. So the way that this works is that if we have great content, if we have a great business focus, if we have written a great book, we've got great talks, that's all great and wonderful. But if we are not exercising the self-discipline, the self-confidence, the people skills, the structure, and the goal setting, the back wheel stops and we are stuck. So our thought habits either support our success or they sabotage our success. And the reason we get stuck sometimes is because this is going on. Can anybody relate to that? Has anyone ever been stuck besides me? Okay, excellent. Not excellent that we get stuck, but it's a part of life. And I truly believe the learning happens in the valleys. How many of you would agree with that? Whenever you hit a rock bottom or a bump in the road, something good comes out of it. Yes, I'm reading through the comments. So I do believe that. And me getting stuck got me to pivot and change and focus on one market and get back to the basics of sales. So the first piece of it, as I mentioned, the sales confidence code. What is it? What does it mean? Now, if you're taking notes, there is an acronym that you can write on your piece of paper, and it's called 6 Habits I Can Use to Sell More. Okay, 6 habits I can use to sell more. So the I can use is the acronym. Okay, so I can use is the acronym I'm going to talk about. The first acronym I stands for I am responsible for my results and I adopt systems and structure. Okay, I'll repeat that. I am responsible for my results and I adapt to systems and structure. Now, for those of you that joined last month, Crystal Washington gave a really great overview of the importance of systems and structure. And we as human beings, we typically resist systems and structure. But I'm going to share the next tip in a few minutes about how a sales process can help you drive more results in your business, no matter what type of focus you have, keynote speaker, consultant, trainer. So this is really all about the habit of structure. So the habit of structure is what is super important if we think about that back wheel of sales success. The next letter is C, and C means consistency builds confidence and connections. Again, consistency builds confidence and connections. This is the habit of self-worth and connections. Okay, so self-worth and connections. So does everybody notice when you're consistent, when you are making the calls or you are practicing your speech or your talk or you're networking when you're an introvert, do you ever notice when you do those things, your self-confidence kind of goes up? Like you really feel good about yourself, whether you made the calls you were going to make or whatever it is on your list. It has been a proven science that the more we do the things we resist and the more we do the things we don't want to do, our confidence will elevate. Okay, so being consistent is super important. And then making the connections is also another way that will drive your business. So what are you doing to make new connections in your business day to day? Are you out networking? Are you a part of associations? NSA is a great association to be a part of for anyone that is not already a member. NSA Illinois is where I started in 2016, and I was in this great chapter for over almost 4 years. Are you in any type of think tank group that relates to your business? How are you getting out there and meeting people? Sitting on our phone on social media is a great way to make connections, but I'm going to share something that I read last week that really blew my mind. I was on LinkedIn and I happened to subscribe to a certain blog called The Daily Sales Tip. And there was a sales manager that got one sales rep to make 500 calls during a week. And he got another sales rep to do 500 LinkedIn messages in a week. Does anybody want to guess which one got more appointments? You can put it in the chat if you'd like to, or you can shout it out. Who got more appointments? The person that was on the phone or the person that was on LinkedIn? Oh, I see everybody saying calls. All right. Calls, yes. 5 stars, 10 stars. You are absolutely correct. The person that picked up the phone and made 500 calls, even though a lot were voice messages, probably didn't reach everybody on the first attempt, got 40 appointments. Does anybody want to guess how many appointments the person sending LinkedIn messages got? Goose egg, 2, 0.
0.
You said 0. Liz, you get the prize. 0. And also Parissa, 0. They got 0 appointments and meetings. So I don't want to tell you that LinkedIn is not the way to go, or Facebook or Instagram. I'm not here to bash social media today. But what I will share with you is that picking up the phone, as much as we might all resist that from time to time, it still proves to be successful. Last Friday afternoon, I did exactly that. I had an hour left in my day. Did I want to do my prospecting calls? No, but I had that commitment to myself to do it. Out of about 10 calls and follow-ups I made, I got 4 people on the phone, and a couple of them led to appointments. And I think one of them was a sales opportunity that advanced to the next step. So don't be afraid to pick up the phone. Our email boxes are flooded. Our social media, I don't know about all of you, but my message box is filled with people trying to sell me this or that. Just think about this for a minute. People are not calling each other as much today. So a call really can make the difference between success and failure. Now, the next letter is A, stands for attitude of excellence. Attitude of excellence. And I'll tell you that this is important because this is what we call the habit of creation. An attitude of excellence is really, the way I see this is, if you think about going up a mountain and the top of your mountain is, I want to make X bananas this year as a speaker, or I want to get this many gigs, or I want to, whatever it is, whatever your goal might be, is what I'm doing right now going to help me get up to that top of that mountain, or is it pulling me further away from the mountain? And this is what I really call having a habit of excellence, being intentional about how we're spending our time. Is it a networking group that we're going to that we really don't feel like is our target market anymore? Do we have commitments that we don't want anymore? Are we involved in things we don't want to be involved in? Because time is precious and we only have so much of it. So really start to think about having this attitude of excellence. Number 4 is natural genius is my secret sauce. Natural genius is my secret sauce. This is the habit of fulfillment. So what do we mean by natural genius is my secret sauce and the habit of fulfillment? Everybody has a natural genius. For some of us, I'm thinking about my friend Sima again, marketing, branding, she's an expert at that. I'm thinking, Chris, of his entertainment and the magic and all of the amazing things he does. And whatever your secret sauce is, are you bringing it to the world? Because that which is not used shall be taken away. The world needs what you talk about. The world needs what your talents are. And it makes people go to new levels when you share it with them, whether it's a group or an audience, whatever. Again, if you're a coach, it might be one-on-one. If it's an audience, as a trainer or a keynote speaker. But I remember when I first got into Speakers Academy, Bob was our dean at that time. And I said, I hate sales. I'm so burned out. I'm tired of sales training. I don't ever want to do this. I want to completely change directions. And then he said to me, Amy, do you think anybody could learn from your years of selling? Do you think there's just one thing you could teach one person? And then I took a deep breath and I realized, yes, he's right. Okay, so here I am again. I laugh sometimes because, again, whether you're a frontline sales professional, speaker, trainer, facilitator, we are entrepreneurs. Sales and entrepreneurship, I really believe that the habits and the things we do to be successful are the same. So think about what your secret sauce is. And if you've been avoiding it, and if you have been not speaking about it or taking it to the world, today is my invitation to help you think about doing that. Because fulfillment also means having joy in the journey. Life happiness comes from talking about and doing what you enjoy doing, doesn't it? Right? So those years I was in sales, I think the reason I got burned out is because I was not enjoying it anymore. I was tired of selling someone else's product and being told what to do every day. I wanted to teach other people to sell. That's when I really got in touch with what my secret sauce was. So I would love to see in the chat, what is your secret sauce? Please share in the chat. And if you want to shout it out, you can shout it out too. But we are definitely monitoring the chat. So what is your secret sauce? What is the talent or skill that you have that nobody else has that you could teach the world in your talk, your training, your coaching, your business, or even if you're in sales? Working with visionaries, pattern interrupters, change agents, brillianters, neuroscience of persuasion. Wow. Complicated concepts made easy to understand. Love that. Building high impact digital courses that create real change. How to reprogram the mind to focus. Awesome. These are excellent. So again, your secret sauce, what is that one thing that you can do so well that you could teach other people to do it? Help women create a custom career roadmap. Don't be shy. Okay, keep those coming in because other people can see that we all have we have a secret sauce, we have a natural genius, affordable housing. Love that. Now, as we go to the next letter of I can use, the next letter is U. And U stands for ultimate sales machine, pig-headed discipline. Okay, and I'll say it again, it's going to sound crazy. Ultimate sales machine and pig-headed discipline. Okay, ultimate sales machine and pig-headed discipline. This is the habit of self-discipline. Where did I get this from? I wish I could take credit for it, but I cannot. There is a great author, the late Chet Holmes, wrote a book called The Ultimate Sales Machine. I highly recommend it. And when he wrote this book, he talks throughout the book about how to be great in sales. Part of this is it requires pig-headed self-discipline. The other thing that he talked about is having a stadium pitch. My friend Lois Kramer, I have her book right here. She calls this a positioning statement. Chet calls it a stadium pitch. So if you think about this, and we're going to practice this a little bit later, but if you were in a stadium on a stage and there's, thousands of people sitting there, if you stood up and gave your pitch, your elevator statement, your positioning statement, and if people can decide to stay or walk out of the stadium, what would they do? Would they stay or would they walk out? So this is why it's so important to have not only an ultimate sales machine, pig-headed self-discipline, but also creating a compelling stadium pitch. Okay, and again, this is a habit of self-discipline because this is not a spectator sport, as I always say. Sales and business development and getting the gigs, it is a activity. It is not just a sit at your desk type of sport, as I always say. Okay, so let's close this out with the last S stands for self-driven. I eliminate distractions. So I am self-driven. I eliminate distractions. The habit that this is called is this is the habit of work. Okay, so again, I am self-driven. I eliminate distractions, the habit of work. Distractions are everywhere. We have, I have my phone here because I've got the clock on it. We have social media, we have the world, we have the news, we have TVs, we have everything around us. And we can choose to be in that distraction or we can choose to be out of that distraction. So the habit of work is also making it a habit to annihilate procrastination. Okay, so annihilating procrastination. How do we do this? Annihilating procrastination, excuse me, is really fun. This is going to might sound corny, falling in love with the work we do. How can I make this work I'm doing right now enjoyable? I have my favorite drink. I love these drinks. Ice drinks right here. I have, if you were to look at my desk, I have a candle. I keep my desk nice. I have my office painted in a color that I really like. I have some plants behind me on both sides. I have a affirmation about vision behind me. How can we make our work more enjoyable? Maybe I need to go to Starbucks to do my work. Maybe I need to go somewhere where there's nobody around. And I see Chris has a mini fridge in his office filled with the same drink. All right, love that. But what can I do to make this enjoyable? I also sometimes burn incense in my office. Try not to do it in front of the camera. People think my office is on fire. But how can I make this enjoyable? And I'm going to give you all a power tip right now. Schedule power sessions. I'm going to spend 1 hour preparing my content for NSA Illinois. And during that time, I'm not going to go to the refrigerator. I'm not going to go do my laundry. I am not going to get on Facebook. I am going to sit down and I'm going to do this. And I'm going to set a timer for, 45, 50, 60 minutes, whatever it is. I'm going to set a timer. And when I'm done, I'm done. So power sessions can be 15 minutes long. They can be 30 minutes long. But when we have these tasks that we avoid, the best thing to do is to schedule a power session. A power session is a self-imposed deadline. Okay, that's really what it comes down to. So the other killer of the way we stay distracted is multitasking. So right now, if you're on your email, if you're on social media, if you are, maybe you've got me on off camera and you're on another conversation. I'm not knocking anyone for that. And I'll confess, I used to do this on corporate conference calls a lot. Okay. I confess, I put it out there. Everyone knows it. I've done it. But here is something to think about. If you're driving your car down a highway, like if I'm driving on the Eisenhower in Chicago, am I going to be switching lanes between, all of the lanes? We might from time to time, but for the most part, we stay in one lane and we give that lane 100% of our attention. My personal philosophy is when we're bouncing between a bunch of different tasks, we can only give each of those like 30%. And it leads to poor quality, it leads to mistakes, it leads to missing information if we are bouncing between many things at once. So multitasking is really not the solution as much as it might seem like I'm getting more done at one time. When I was getting ready this morning, I was doing my hair, putting on my makeup, and that voice said, go in your office, make sure to get everything ready and go do that now. And that other voice said, no, stay here and get ready and then go do that next thing. Because when we switch between tasks, it takes us 30% more energy and brain power to get back into what we were doing. So something to think about there. Okay, so we have gone through the first piece of what I wanted to share today, which is, again, the sales confidence code. And these are success habits I can use to drive more sales. So before we continue, I want to ask if there's any questions, and if you either want to say them out loud or you can put them in the chat. And Chris, I don't know if you've been seeing any questions in the chat, or Dean, but I'm going to pause a moment.
Well, I have a question.
Yes.
When we were talking about the power of making those calls, one of the things in the chat mentioned, but the rejection is real. None of us like rejection. What can you share with us about how to deal with the emotional distress of that and keep plowing through it?
Great question. So one thing that I think about when I do in-person workshops, and if we were together right now, I would hand you all a bag of M&Ms, not just because I'm nice, but not because I like chocolate, which I do. But think about your prospecting or looking for speaking or consulting opportunities like a bag of M&Ms. When you open up a bag of M&Ms, we see red M&Ms, yellow M&Ms, and green M&Ms, and all these other colors. So if you think about it this way, this is a numbers game, and even the best speakers, the best entrepreneurs, the best consultants, and again, I've been training people for 10 years. I have never met someone that closes 100% of their business. Now, if you know someone that does, let me know and I'll start teaching what they teach. But we are doing really good if we're closing 10 to 30% of our opportunities. So if you think about it like a bag of M&Ms, some days you're going to get a lot of greens, which are yeses. Some days you're going to get a lot of maybes, which are yellow. Some days you're going to get a lot of no's, which are red. And then we have all those, the brown, the what other colors? Blue. We have those other colors which are called MIA, missing in action. I have one right now. They said they wanted to hire me. We love you. We want you to come in and work with this person on our team. I have been leaving them a message a week for like probably 2 months now. They've just gone MIA on me. It's going to happen. So that's the way that I think about it. I think about it more like a numbers game. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Great. And Diane is asking, what is the S? The S is self-driven. Okay, so I'm sorry that I can use, sorry about that. I had that wrong in the chat. Okay, so the E stands for excellence, have an attitude of excellence. And then the S stands for self-driven. So I had those flip-flopped. And I see Dean has a comment or question. What have I found to be helpful for people to uncover their natural genius as opposed to the work I do for my clients? I believe, and I have a whole nother speech and a whole nother story for another day, but I believe a lot of our mission comes from our life experiences. So again, a whole nother speech for another day. Self-confidence is really what I'm teaching. I'm talking about sales tips, but I struggled with self-confidence most of my life. I was almost killed by a drunk driver when I was 9. Long story, too many surgeries to count, but the toll it took on my self-confidence was what I needed to work on and heal. I did that through self-development seminars and workshops, and that's how, why I'm so passionate about it today and why I bring it to sales. So to answer your question, Dean, I invite you to really do an inventory, this might sound really deep, of your whole life. Have there been any big lessons, any events, anything that has taught you something that you could teach the world? So this takes some self-discovery, but I think if you take that time to do that, think about times in your life and messages. And that's really what I talk to people about when we talk about life purpose. I hope that helps. Your secret sauce. Review the steps one more time. And just a hint, the steps will be in some of the bonus content you're going to receive, but the steps I can use, I'll just say them quickly. I am responsible for my results is number 1. Number 2, C is consistency creates confidence and connections. A is have an attitude of excellence. N stands for natural genius is my secret sauce. U stands for ultimate sales machine and pig-headed discipline. Ultimate sales machine meaning what am I doing every day to drive my sales? And then S stands for self-driven, eliminate distractions. Okay, other questions? Is there anything I've missed in these? Okay, I'm going through this. Okay. Any other questions anybody wants to ask? There's no such thing as a stupid question, as we all know. Nope. Okay, great. We'll move forward then. Okay, so the reason that I created this whole idea of the Sales Confidence Code, which is going to take me to my next step, is there was a year in my career. Again, I'm an open book. I'll talk about anything. For anyone that knows me might know that. But there was a year in my sales where it was about 2010. I had the best year ever. Making great money, got on stage at the national sales meeting. And the next year, I couldn't sell anything. One morning, I was going out on my sales appointments. I got an email in my inbox. And it was that email that no one wants to get. It was the PIP, the Performance Improvement Plan letter, saying from my boss, if you don't turn around your sales results in the next 90 days, you will be fired. Fired, I thought. I was angry at first. how could she do this? What's wrong with her? I've been here for, 10 years now. I had this attitude that it was all her problem. And then I came to realize that it wasn't her problem at all. It was my problem. And the reason that I developed some of what I'm sharing today is that I had to make a decision that night when I got home from work. Either I'm going to try to turn this around by some miracle, or I'm going to quit and find a new job. And I knew nobody was going to hire me at 3% of my sales quota midway through the year. That just was going to be pretty tough to find a company that would want someone like that. In medical sales, it's pretty competitive. So I decided to take the right hand turn. I hired a coach, and the coach got me to see a lot of what I'm going to share with you next. The coach got me to see, number one, there's 3 A's to success: attitude, activity, and accountability. Okay. Attitude, activity, and accountability. Number one, when I say attitude, he got me to see that my attitude was focused on success and failure and fear every day. He helped me see that. And the second I changed my attitude back to success, I said to myself, I'm not throwing this sales career down the toilet. I mean, I've been in this profession now for, decades. My mom was in sales, my dad was in sales. There's no way I'm quitting. So once I flipped my attitude back to success, everything changed. The next thing that he got me to see is activity. Activity means, what are we doing day in and day out to get results? Whether we want to get more speaking gigs, more consulting gigs, more training gigs, what am I doing to drive that? Now, I keep weekly KPIs on that to this day. And my coach, I had to send him every Friday an Excel spreadsheet of how many calls I had made, how much business I had closed, how many appointments I had booked. I mean, all of that was on a spreadsheet. I still use it to this day. It's a Google sheet today. So really ask yourself, am I doing the activity that it requires? Because if you're not doing the activity, like me that year, I confess I had gotten lazy. I just thought last year was a great year. Like, it could be a great speaking business year. It was the best. I made great bananas. And we think that's just going to automatically carry into this year, and it doesn't. Last year proved that to me again. You can't just put your feet up and wait for things to happen, or hope. Hope is not a strategy. Last is accountability. Accountability is what we are doing when nobody else is watching. So holding ourselves accountable to the results was a big part of how I was able to turn around my year. Now, I did end that year at 128% of my quota. I'm not saying that to brag. Maybe I am. But I'm saying that to also give you an invitation for attitude, activity, and accountability. And having a coach and having a mentor is something I've had in my life for at least the last 10 years. So it doesn't mean we're weak to get a coach. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with us. Maybe it's even a therapist. Whatever it is, sometimes we need someone to guide us out of where we are to where we're going. And that's why I have such a passion also about coaching at the same time. Okay, now I do see more questions in the chat. I'm going to come back to those when I finish this next piece, I promise. But let me just see if there's anything that's burning, that's sticking out, that has a question. Love it. Okay, I see like amazing comments. Okay, so here's where we go to the next step. The next step is about the sales process. So when I saw the great emails from NSA Illinois about what I was talking about today, one of the things I promised you is a 5-step sales process. And I have so much passion about sales process, and I'm going to tell you why. Because back in the day when I was in sales, I remember I was at this company and they had a sales process, and I was like, I've been in sales a long time. I don't need to follow what they're talking about. I mean, I know, I know what I'm doing, but my results were like this. I was not successful. And there was this one girl on our sales team that always was being talked about. She was always sharing her wins. And instead of comparing myself to her, which we sometimes do, I got curious and I picked up the phone and I called her and I said, Laura, I'm just curious, how are you crushing it every month? What are you doing? And so this is where this ties into whether we're in sales or a speaking business. She said, Amy, I follow the sales process. So when I went out on my own and I started following the sales process, and I got better from there. I'll just shorten the story. But when I went out on my own, I realized I need a new sales process. So a lot of what I do for my revenue is my goal is to work with companies that will hire me for a 3 month, 6 month, 12 month is what I really like. Hire me for 12 months to work with your team on sales and success habits. So that way I have recurring revenue coming in every month. This is one of the best things that I learned from Michelle Villalobos in her program. Create a model that brings you recurring revenue every month. So when I went out on my own in 2021, I realized I need to figure out a sales process. So what I want to share with all of you right now is my 5-step sales process that you can also follow to get more speaking, or really for long-term consulting agreements. Maybe you do the keynote and then you want to continue working with the organization. For myself, that's what I do. I speak and then I go through the sales process. Sometimes I meet a business owner and I don't do the speaking. We meet at a networking group and they just say, "Oh my gosh, you do sales training, we should talk." So here we go. Another acronym, it's called DEALS, DEALS. Deals is the process I follow. So I'm going to walk through these and I'm going to just share a little bit about each of the steps. The first is D. D stands for discovery. Schedule a discovery call or schedule a discovery meeting. In this meeting, the most important thing to find out is what are the problems the person or the company is experiencing that could lead to a why now. A why now is why they've got to hire me. Okay. So the discovery meeting, some things to think about. This is not a sales pitch. This is not me coming in and giving my one sheet and talking about everything I do. This is me sitting back and interviewing the person that's in front of me. Now, for all of us that might be keynote speakers, I'm assuming you probably already do a discovery call. So I have a questionnaire I created, and I know that when I was in Speakers Academy, I got one from NSA Illinois also. But my invitation is to create some type of a questionnaire of the questions that you can ask that person, because when I don't have that in front of me, I'm not going to probably ask the questions I need to uncover their pain and their problems. So discovery is the first step. Number 2, E stands for executive summary. Okay, so I'm just looking at Dean. So if I'm meeting with Dean, I would say, "Dean, in my discovery meeting, I'm going to walk you through the process. Would you be okay if I share with you how I typically work with businesses? Number 1, I'm going to do a discovery call today. Number 2, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to come back with an executive summary and some recommendations. And then after that, if you agree with my recommendations, I'm going to present a proposal. And then if the proposal looks good, I will finalize with a letter of commitment." Okay, so I set that stage on that first appointment. Okay, so that's a fast forward to what the deals process is. So D is discovery, E is executive summary. Once I've done that discovery meeting, I take all of those notes and I put that into a single document. So as an example, I had a company here in the St. Louis area. This is going back probably one of my first opportunities. It was a HVAC services company. They have a sales team. And their goal was they wanted to hit 18 million bananas for the year. That was their sales goal. And they were concerned because their numbers had been going down over the years and they couldn't figure out why. So when I was in that discovery meeting, I found out a lot of the problems and the lack of structure, the lack of sales process, all the problems they had. And when I came back with my executive summary, I shared, "Here are the biggest issues I heard you say during your meeting." And then the next letter stands for A, is agreement on recommendations. These are the recommendations I'm going to make for you. Okay, so one document, executive summary, followed by agreement on recommendations. The agreement on recommendations is, here's how I think I might be able to help you solve this problem. And then I'm going to bullet point how I'm going to help them. I don't put the numbers. I don't talk about my sales programs. I just give them some high level ideas. If they like what they see, which majority of the time, thankfully, they have in my experience, then if they say, this looks great, Amy, we agree. Dean says, I like it. Great, Dean. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to work on a proposal, and I'd like to schedule a meeting right now for that meeting when I can come back and meet with you. If it's out of state, you're probably not going to fly in an airplane to meet someone if they're out of state. But I always schedule a meeting for that proposal. And I send that proposal before the meeting, and then we review it on Zoom or we review it in person. I never just send out a proposal without any follow-up meetings scheduled, because why? They might look at the competition. They might say, oh my gosh, this was way too much. They might not ever read it. They might go on vacation. Who knows? But we've lost the sale if we don't set that next appointment. So making sure that we have that agreement on the recommendations is super important. And then the next letter is the next letter in the next part of this is proposal. That's the L. Okay, proposal, L at the end of proposal. This is when I present the proposal, and a couple tips on this proposal I want to share with all of you. If it's a longer consulting proposal and they say, wow, we didn't know it was going to be this much, then I'll say, Dean, I completely understand. How about if we take this 6-month proposal and stretch it out over 12 months or 18 months? Now, what I've just done here is this. I'm not discounting my package. I'm giving them all the same services. We're just going to stretch it out a little bit so their monthly payments are lower. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah, I've done that a couple times. That way I'm not having to take anything out of the quote, and I'm not having to lose any money. And one more tip on proposals. I learned this in my sales career. If you can get them to sign by, if I'm sending it to Dean, I might have a line at the bottom that says, Dean, I'm going to give you an incentive. If you sign off on this by May 31st, I will give you an additional 10% off this program. Why do I do that? Because that drives urgency. It makes sure that this doesn't go under a pile on his desk with all the other papers and things he's working on. And everybody wants to save money. So I will do that. I will only give that type of a courtesy break if they are willing to sign a contract. Don't call it a contract. I didn't say that. Letter of commitment by a certain date. Okay. And then last but not least, S stands for shared commitment, letter of commitment. Shared commitment, letter of commitment. So many pieces of this, but the letter of commitment, make it simple. My letter of commitment is about 3 pages, maybe 4. I make it simple, and I never, ever, ever call it a contract. I don't call it terms and conditions. Why? Because then they're going to get a lawyer involved. And then it's going to go through, 5 or 6 people. And before we know it, we've lost control of the sale. So I call it a letter of commitment or a letter of agreement, either one. And when I say shared commitment, my biggest invitation to everybody today is really make sure this is a company and someone you want to do business with, right? We all want to make the big bananas. We all want to have big fat bank accounts. I'm right there with you. And we don't want to take on a client, a company, or someone that is not going to be a win-win. When I left corporate America, I promised myself that I would no longer work with negative cultures, toxic people, or anything that drains my happiness, because I had done that for such a long time. So that's my invitation to you. Really make sure it is a win-win for all parties involved. That's what I mean by a shared commitment. Okay, so we are we're getting close to our break time. And before we do that, I'm just going to see if there's questions. I'm also going to take a look at the chat and see if there's anything new in here. Love that. Accountability is what we are doing when no one else is watching. Yes, so true. One of my favorite sayings from Tony Robbins is, we get rewarded publicly for what we do privately, right? We get rewarded publicly for what we do privately. Think about that too. And I see, Greg, you have raised your hand, and then I will come back to Chris's question after that in the chat. So yes, Greg.
So quick question. I met with a client face to face the other day. He was very bottom line, and we just got it all out on the table. I mean, it was just like this guy wanted to know. I told him, he said, "Great, I have a meeting next week." I gave him a proposal. That's there. I felt happy about that. But the question I have is, I'm working with another association in real estate, and I met them. I've gone through the system. I have a background in sales, so I'm doing much of what you're talking about. And then she called me the other day and she said, "We saw your sizzle reel. We just think it's fabulous. We don't think we can afford you." And she asked me about price without me presenting value. And I said, "Listen, my fees match most people's budgets. It all depends on how much I can help you. I really need to know that." Well, I thought that was enough. And then I get an email yesterday that says the board really wants to know your points, how much you're going to cost.
Right.
And at first I was just like angry. I think I have the solution, but I'm asking you, what would you do if somebody asked you for your fee before you presented value? I really want to know. I'm coachable here.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. So a couple ideas on this one. This is always there's in my in my past and in my present, there's really three things that drive a win. Number one, we got to have a why now. There's got to be a number, dollar percentages, compelling event that the customer is going to see that staying the way we are is not an option. We need to change, whether it's hiring you to speak or whatever it is. Number two, we got to have an executive sponsor, somebody that owns the decision, makes access to, has access to funding, and also can make the necessary decisions. And then last but not least, the last one is buying process, really knowing upfront at that first meeting who's going to be involved. Tell me about your internal process. How's this going to go? And making sure I ask that early and often in the process. Now, back to really getting right down to the question and really a specific answer. For anyone here that has not read any of David Newman's books, I always say, I want you to read my book, but of course, I'm going to recommend, I've got a lot of books I'm going to talk about. But David Newman's Do It Selling is a really great read. And in that book, he really talks about quantifying the problem. So as an example, if I, in my discovery, when I was in that meeting with the HVAC company example, I did ask them, I said, what is the main driving reason why you want to possibly work with me or hire me for this engagement? And the COO said, we want to get to 18 million this year, and we don't think we can do it right now. So I would also try to quantify what their problems are. And I think also when they're asking for a fee or a price, I would tell them what my range is. And I say, I'm flexible. I can work with you on that. Ross Bernstein visited NSA St. Louis. I recommend and invite you all to invite him to speak if you ever can. But one of the things he also talked about is, this is going to sound crazy. He said, take every gig no matter what. If they're not going to pay you your fee, maybe part of it is, okay, well, then I'm going to ask you to make me 3 recommendations to 3 associations you're associated with. For myself, if there's not a good fee, okay, great. Well, then I want to make sure that we can have my books as part of the package. So I'll put that in as a revenue driver. But I have had the same thing. I had a company recently say, oh my gosh, you're way out of our range. We can't afford you, but thanks, sorry, we wasted your time. And I got right back to the person. I said, hey, I want to work with you too. I really thought we had a great rapport with each other. What can we do to make this happen? So just being really pleasantly bold and direct and telling that person, whoever it is, I really want to work with you. I'm excited about this opportunity. I thought we had a great synergy. We've got to be enthusiastic and passionate and show them that we really care, because enthusiasm means I am sold myself. And people buy from whom they like and trust, as Zig Ziglar would say. So I would not give up. I would give them the fee and I would say I'm flexible and I would stay on it. That's what I would do in that situation. And I saw Hayden's hand go up, and there was one more before I go
Amy,
to
you answered it right at the end. So I had a clarifying question on Gregory, and I'm just saying that was all net from the 3-point line, that you answered the question right in the last half a minute. Just all net.
All right, thank you.
Stephen Curry.
And Chris asked, Chris, I think you asked me, how did I turn my attitude around?
Yeah, that was my question. You had
Okay.
discussed being at that low point of attitude, and I find that it's not so easy just to snap a finger and change your mindset. So where do you go with that? How do you do it?
Okay. So I have, for again, I know Simon knows this about me, but I am a personal and self-development junkie.
Mhm.
I am a Tony Robbins senior leader. I've been going to his workshops for many years. I started going to workshops when I was 19. So I've made personal and professional development a habit and a part of my life. But on a daily basis, how do I, when I was in that rut, one of the biggest invitations I have to everybody here is the power of a morning ritual. So I heard you say, Chris, that you went out running this morning. I also, one of my favorite books is The Miracle Morning. I even have a little clip in it. So this is my morning routine. Each morning I do, answer a question. I write a journal entry. I read a chapter from Wayne Dyer. Change your thoughts, change your life. I work out. I do what I got to do to show up how I'm showing up right now. And I think that particular year, I remember this was back when CDs were still hot. I had Tony Robbins CDs playing in my car all the time. That's all I did between my appointments. I listened to Tony. The coach I hired, by the way, was from Tony Robbins' organization. So I just listened to those messages. And I think really hiring that coach, between hearing the messages, really sticking to a morning routine, and then again, having that coach, those are probably the three ways I changed my attitude the most. Other questions? These are great questions. Exchange of value. Love that. Yeah, so if we can't bridge that gap between the budget, as Lynn is saying, there's other ways that we can still win. And I'm not going to sit here today. I know that some of us, I've heard, I won't mention names. I've heard some speakers say, I will never speak for free. And I hear other people say, I will speak for free. And you've got to do what is best for you. But one thing I will share with you is speaking is probably my biggest lead magnet. If you don't like sitting on the phone and making those calls, one of the best ways you can get new business and new prospects and new opportunities is to get out there and speak. So yeah, speak. I love what Bob just said. I will speak for value and sharing your content. Sharing, and again, I am part of the survey. I'm going to share some of my content with all of you. I'm sharing it now during this talk, but information is everywhere. Do you have a weekly newsletter? Do you put, when you go on social media, do you put thought-provoking information? What are you putting out to the world? What type of content marketing is your business driving every day? The more you speak, the more you speak. Yeah, that's right. Love that, Dean. Okay, so congratulations, Lynn. I'm so excited that you're going to be joining me on this amazing journey. And the more I practice this program, the more I practice thought habits, the better life is. And one invitation that I'll also share with all of you to think about today is, when I am the best version of myself, I will attract the best people, the best opportunities, and the best abundance to my life. So really think about that. Am I showing up as my best version of myself in my business? Because if we are, great. If we're not, if you don't go through my program, totally get it. Completely respect everybody, whether you decide to do it or not. And Lynn, again, congratulations. But at a minimum, check out this book on Amazon, The Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino. I am an Og Mandino certified leadership coach. And a lot of what I'm going to be teaching, as I said, is going to be the 10 scrolls in the back of this book. These are like the 10 commandments of success. Everything about mastering your emotions to living this day as though it's your last, to bringing value every day. There's these messages, and this is what we're going to study and focus. And this is something that's a part of my life. This is another part of my morning routine. I listen to or read 3 of these scrolls every morning. So please check this out on Amazon. I think I'm looking at my book. It's like $7.99. Okay, so everybody check that out. And we're going to continue forward. So as we get into the back end of our discussion today, we've talked about the sales confidence code. We've talked about the deals process, the 5-step sales process that I just talked about. The next piece that we are going to be going through is Meaningful messaging and conversation starters. For those of you that took the Taco.Dot survey, I've got some great news for you. This is one of the bonuses that you have received. If you haven't taken the Taco.Dot survey, please do it. But so much of what I'm going to share in this section came from a couple books I have in front of me. Getting to Veto, The Very Important Top Officer, and Think and Sell Like a CEO, both by, moving my hand out of the way, Anthony Parinello. So these are two highly recommended books in addition to Chet Holmes' Ultimate Sales Machine and The Greatest Salesman in the World. I'm going to tell a quick background about how did I find these books? Where did I find value in them? And how does that have to do anything with conversation starters? I used to call on C-suite executives, and I still do today. When I was in medical sales, I was selling infusion pumps in the state of Illinois, and it could be a sale of anywhere from 100,000 bananas to 19 million bananas. And guess who the main decision maker was? I had to get to either a chief nurse officer, chief operating officer, people at that type of a level. I didn't know how to do it. And I had a really tough boss at the time. And another part of my career, it's like I decided I've got to figure this out somehow, or I need to get into selling something different. So I had heard about these books, hadn't read them, but I decided to check it out. And so one of the best things I really enjoy about Tony Parinello and his books is that he also used to call on the C-suite. Now, here is just the short version of what I want to share with you is that people decide within 7 seconds if they want to talk to you based on what you say in those first 7 seconds. So if you're trying to get a decision maker, meeting planner, whoever it might be, what am I going to say during those first 7 seconds? So in his books, he talks really there's a lot of things he talks about, but one of the things he really talks about is conversation starters and some prospecting best practices. So these are great books to get, again, on Amazon. So the first thing that I want to talk about is that I'm jumping around a little bit, but be brief, be bright, be gone. Okay. So when you're leaving a voice message or you're calling someone on the phone, don't tell a story. Don't make it some really long-winded dissertation. So when I send messages on LinkedIn, as an example, I might say, hello, Joe. It's great to meet you. I see we have some mutual contacts. It would be great to share some ideas with you as to how I'm working with other companies to accelerate sales performance. So I say something like that. I never say, here's my business and here's what I do. I want to share some ideas with you about how I could accelerate performance, amplify success, whatever it might be. So when we talk about prospecting on the phone, in person, or email, sure, I have an idea. Maybe what's the idea? Is there something that you could help them? Most people want to know how to make money, save money, and mitigate risk. So if you can share an idea that's going to help them make money, save money, or mitigate risk, that's what they want to know about. So on the bonus content, there's a few conversation starters, but I'm just going to share a couple of the ones that I happen to use a lot. I just shared one example. And we have a mutual contact is a great conversation starter. I've landed some really big appointments and meetings. Now, don't make something up, right? We don't want to do that. It's got to be someone that we really know is connected to the person that we're trying to get in touch with. The other thing I also say is I am working with another high performing company and I'm helping them achieve A, B, C, and D. So just get a one-liner that you can say to open up that conversation, but don't start out by saying your name and your company and everything you're doing, because I hate to say it, nobody cares. They really don't care who you are. They don't care what the name of your company is. They want to know what you're going to do to help them. And you want to get them curious as quickly as possible. The other side of this too is the stadium pitch. I talked about this earlier. Do you have a positioning statement? Again, another book, if you've not recommended this, my friend and St. Louis colleague, Lois Kramer, Book More Business, Make More Money Speaking, another great book to read. But she talks about positioning statements, and I call this the stadium pitch. So having a stadium pitch that really sticks is critical. What do you say in your stadium pitch? I put mine on the bonus piece of content, but I have it memorized so I can say it. I work with companies to accelerate sales, elevate performance, and amplify success by simplifying sales complexity so you can dominate your market and conquer your competition. Okay, that's what I say. So I'm going to give everybody a minute or two. Quick exercise. What is your positioning statement? Do you have one? If you don't have one, why not take these few minutes and put one together that, because we know that if we put it off till later, it's not going to happen. I'll speak for myself. But what is your positioning statement? And the way that you can put this formula together is, who do you work with? What do you help them achieve, improve, or overcome? And what is the end result that you bring them? So if anybody has examples, Gregory says, I work with real estate agents to increase their focus so they can increase their sales. Love that. Colin, I don't have one. Okay, I thought of someone that can contact me, and I'm confident they'll meet with me. Okay. So again, would love to see what some of your positioning statements, stadium pitches are. Hayden, I help organizations cut turnover of younger employees so people show up and you can ship on time. Nice. And Lynn, I fast track leaders to be seen, heard, and promoted. Wow. Chris, I work with fiduciaries to address the challenges they have with addicted clients. Excellent. Very powerful. I heard one recently locally here in St. Louis, and hers was really short, but she said, I help companies go from startup to grown up. So, it can be something short. It doesn't have to be long, but the formula I'm providing with you is what I've used. I initially learned it from Lois. I also learned it as the stadium pitch in Chet's book, The Ultimate Sales Machine. Any others? Don't be shy. Make one up. Okay, Parissa, I help modern badasses to be seen with their intentions, not as intention. Love that. And then Hayden says, my favorite of all time was on a September, let me see, a septic tank pump company. We want to be number one in a number two business. Love that. Okay, Rob, I work with leaders who want to be more persuasive and authoritative in everything they do. That means helping them break free from death by PowerPoint. Love that. Tell their story and communicate like humans should. Oh, that's awesome. Diane, I help speakers, consultants, and trainers increase their reach, impact, and profit through digital course design, development, and delivery. Nice. And then Mark, what is one thing that is getting in the way of growing your business or controlling your costs? Great opening question. And then Rosie, we have, I empower corporate women to advance their careers with intention while building confidence. Wow, these are very powerful. Okay, seeing if there's any more. These are really great examples. And there's not one in here that I would say needs to be changed or shifted. I work with organizations to unlock their performance potential so they can think fast, be confident, and grow their businesses as a team. Nice. All right. And I want to go back to what Rob's comment was. I purposely am not using PowerPoint today. It wasn't that I was lazy. It wasn't that I don't know how to put a PowerPoint presentation together. I typically don't use PowerPoint in an NSA conversation. And the only time I typically will use PowerPoint in virtual is if I'm doing a really hardcore sales training where we're going through the steps of the sales process. But one of the ways that I also invite you to consider is when you're meeting with clients, if you can get away from a PowerPoint, can you have a conversation with a whiteboard? Can you just give them an infographic to take a look at? Because sometimes with too many PowerPoint slides, the audience can tune out quickly. And then also our attention span seems to go down a lot with, and again, I'm not 100% knocking PowerPoint, but I'm very selective about how and when I use it. Not to mention, sometimes PowerPoint can lead to disasters. And right, I love what Rob says. PowerPoint can be used for good and bad. Exactly. So I'm not saying it's just a bad thing, but I'm just saying I'm pretty choosy about when I will and will not use it. Okay, are there any more questions or positioning statements that are in the chat, stadium pitches, before we continue on to our last piece?
Oh, I have a question
Yes.
about the stadium pitch. Would you, I mean, because this has gone through a few iterations, you mentioned Lois Kramer's version, and you've got another version. What are the key components of the stadium pitch to you?
Okay, yeah, the key components for me is number one, who's my target audience? So again, for me, I say I work with teams because sorry, I'm already backtracking. I've changed mine a few times, and it's good to change these, by the way. I'm probably on my 4th version since I started my company, but I work with companies. So either teams or companies. So that sends a message that that's my audience. So number one, who is the audience? Number two, what do you help them to achieve, improve, get better at? What is it that you do? And then what's the end result you're going to bring them? So those are usually, there's really like 3 pieces of that statement. I work with X so they can achieve, overcome, get better at, so that they can then achieve the ultimate result they want. For anyone that was at Thrive, Christine Cashin gave a really great talk about making them snappy. So if you can get rhymes, or again, the one I shared earlier from startup to grown up, that's just a cute little phrase. But if you can, mine doesn't really have a lot of cute phrases in it, but if you can get things that rhyme or make it fun, that's going to be a little bit more memorable. I have a company I work with called Chase Roofing, and they just have Chase and Leaks. That's that's on their vans. So it can be something fun like that. I just want to remind everybody that if you can get it snappy, like she said, that's even better, because that's going to be even more memorable. But hernia movers, the potential of toting freight. Nice. Love that. Okay. All right. Any other questions before I move on to the last piece, which is about handling objections? Going once, going twice. Okay, we'll continue on then. So the next piece that we're going to talk about is about how to handle and how to overcome objections with confidence. The one point I want to start off with is objections are questions in disguise. My personal philosophy is that when people have an objection, they are typically wanting more information and they're interested. Because we all know in today's world, in today's age, it's easy to ghost people. It's easy to just hit that delete in our mailbox if we don't want to respond to somebody. But when someone has an objection, whether it's our pricing or our program or whatever it might be, I believe it shows that they're interested in what we have to offer, and they're looking for more information. They're looking for clarification. They're looking for more certainty. So what I've done is I put together about 8 tips that I follow for objections that I've learned a long time ago and I still practice today. Some of these are new though, that I've picked up and created recently. So the first thing that I'd like to talk about is number 1, don't give more information that is being asked. Okay. Don't give more information than is being asked. So this also means sometimes we might go into a feature and benefit dump. So if somebody says to me, what's your price? And I'm nervous or I'm uncomfortable. I might say, well, you know what? I have 3 packages. One costs this, one costs that, one costs that. And you know what? But here's something I want to tell you. I'm also doing a promotion, right? Really, really think a minute before we answer, because if we start sharing a lot, if they're asking for a price on one little thing and I start talking about everything I'm selling and the prices, it is typically a nervous response to a question. So don't do that. Instead, really listen in and answer only what they're asking. The second tip I want to give you today is be comfortable with silence. Silence is golden. We've all heard that saying before. We've also heard that saying that whoever speaks last loses, right? And I truly believe that. I remember one quick story is when I got my last marriage, I got married in Las Vegas, and it was at Paris Hotel. They took all these pictures, and the next day we went to look at the pictures, and they were beautiful. They were gorgeous pictures. And then the person told me what the price was, and I was thinking it was going to be this, and it was like that. And I just said simply to that person, I love these pictures, they're great, but I was not planning on spending that much today. And I shut my mouth. And he looked at me and I looked at him, and I just sat there and I held the silence, count to 7, don't say anything. And then he said, oh, I understand. Let me go talk to my manager and see what we can do. And he ended up giving me the whole package. And again, this is back when DVDs were still really hot. He gave me the DVDs. He gave me everything I wanted for about half price. So ask that question, count to 7. I could have easily said, I didn't want to spend that money, but maybe you could take 5% off. I could have said something, but I shut my mouth. And I still use that example today because it really reminded me that whoever speaks last loses. Now, he was the one that spoke next, so he didn't really lose, but he ended up giving me, let's just say, a really great deal. So remember that silence is a great tool for negotiation. It's a great tool for objections, and use it. Count to 7. Number 3, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. I'm going to give Patricia Fripp credit for this one because this is who I originally heard it from. And for those of you that don't know who Patricia Fripp is, she is Hall of Fame speaker, CSP. She was the first female president of NSA. I mean, she's like the OG of NSA. And the reason that I think this one is so important, if you don't ask, the answer is always no, is because how many times do we just let things go, or we don't do something because we're afraid of someone's going to say, we're afraid of what they're going to do, we're afraid they're going to say no. But the worst thing that you risk by answering is yes, right? So just don't be afraid to ask the questions, whatever the questions might be. Number 4, if you don't understand an objection, ask and clarify. So again, I'm going to go back to my earlier days. And for any of us that are aspiring or newer speakers, I won't ask you to raise your hands unless you want to. But again, a lot of the times in the beginning of any career, no matter what career we're in, we're nervous. We're not used to putting ourselves out there. And what can come out of that nervous sometimes, that nervous energy, is we might just start spewing off again. So if you don't understand, it might be, again, Dean, I understand this concern you have. Let me clarify for a moment. You said that you want to work with me, but my price was a little bit more than you budgeted. Is that what you're saying? And you also mentioned that you need to get a few more people to sign off on this. Did I have that right? Yeah. Okay, great. I just want to make sure. So asking, checking, and clarifying questions is a really great tactic in sales and negotiation, whether it's, speaking, entrepreneurship, whatever it is. Number 5, time. This is what I heard many years. Time kills all deals. Okay, time is the killer of all sales and opportunities. Act with urgency and intention. Seek a win-win and know when to walk away. So when we say time kills all deals, there's a lot of reasons for that. Number 1, the longer something continues, people lose interest. The competition comes in. The person we're working with leaves the company. They close their doors. So consistent follow-up, staying on top of it, the opportunity you're working on. One of my golden rules, I don't know how this came up, but I was telling my husband this yesterday. Follow up once a week, and it takes at least 7 follow-ups or more to get someone to say yes, no, maybe, or whatever it is. Do not just follow up one time and think you're going to get the answer, or follow up once and you don't hear back and you give up. Now, the reason I don't follow up every day, unless it's an active proposal we're working on and there's, back and forth, because if we follow up every day, it's kind of like a stalker, right? People think we're a stalker. It's kind of weird. I think it sends a message that we don't have anything to do, and they're the only prospect we have. And there's a company, I'm not going to mention their name, but someone in their company's been sending me an email every day. And it is getting kind of weird now, because I don't want to do business with them, but I'm almost tempted just to reply back to say, stop emailing me, but I haven't. So track your check-ins, track your follow-ups. Again, I use a Google Sheet that does all of that. I use a CRM. As Crystal talked about last week, my CRM also helps me take notes on, I called Sue, left her a message. So when I go to call Sue again, I'm making sure it wasn't just yesterday. Okay, so I think that's really important. Number 6, if a situation or a decision involves multiple people, ask if they can be involved in the discussion instead of having a middleman or a middlewoman. Okay, so this is one of the questions I ask in the beginning in my discovery meeting. Who's going to be involved in this decision? Oh, well, it's going to be this person, this person, this person. Okay, great. Would they be available to join us at the next meeting? Because I know you said you had some pricing concerns. Do you think it would make sense? That's a Lois Kramer term. Would it make sense to have them join us so we can make sure all the questions are answered at that time? Okay, yes. And Chris, I see you've got your hand up.
So you said to follow up once a week, which makes good sense, but we've all had those clients who ultimately just are ghosting and ghosting and ghosting. At what point do you quit following up, and what tactic do you use to try to bring it to some kind of ultimate conclusion so that you can move on with your life?
Okay, great question. So a couple ideas on this one. Number one, I call this a 5-pronged approach. So when I'm following up with them, I follow up different ways. The first week might be a phone call, next week might be LinkedIn, next week might be a text. The next week might be something else like in person, and then I might go to maybe they're on Facebook Messenger. So I really try to change the ways I'm following up. And then if it's been about 6 months or so, there's always that possibility you could send the breakup email that says, Chris, I know that we've been talking about working together for some time, and it sounds like there may be other priorities in the way. I'm always here if you want to pick up the conversation at a future date. I typically don't send those. I know some sales trainers and consultants say to send those. I don't. I just I move them more to like a dormant prospect, and then maybe my follow-up was once a month, but I'll still keep following up with them. I don't usually ever quit. That's just me though.
Let me ask a follow-up question about the
Okay.
topic of following up. So I often feel that when following up, I guess I'm a little self-conscious about ending up sounding needy or beggy, and and of course also just incredibly repetitive. So what are some of the ways in which you follow up?
Some of the
Some
ways
of the things you say in the context of a follow-up. How would you word it?
Yes. And so I go back to that: be brief, be bright, be gone. And it might just be something like, Chris, I was thinking about you today. I would love to support your organization with accelerating sales performance. It would be great to reconnect. I'm available next week at this time, or if it's a text, I'm going to send you my Calendly so we can schedule a time together. But one of the most important things to do is to keep your enthusiasm super high, even when it feels awkward and weird and you feel like you're stalking somebody, because people really want to work with someone that's positive and enthusiastic. Energy is everything, and people want to be around that. So I just fake it till I make it. I'm positive and I'm happy and I'm upbeat, and I continue to leave those messages. And another one of my famous ones is, I have an example right now. There's somebody last week that said, I'll follow up with you this week to talk about what's next. And it's Friday. What time is it? It's 10 to 12. I still haven't heard from him. So one of my other follow-ups I say is, Scott, I'm sorry we missed each other last week. It would be great to connect with you again. So I don't say, Scott, you didn't call me last week. I say, it would be great to reconnect. Sorry we missed each other. So I kind of give them the benefit of the doubt. So I'm not making them weird or awkward. Who knows? Scott could have gone out of town. He could have had a family emergency. Who knows why he hasn't called me yet, but I'm not going to call him until Monday. Does that help?
And that is gold, Amy. I mean, that's the stuff you get from a real pro. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. A lot of this is, again, everybody, these are all lessons learned on my side that on what works and what doesn't work, but just short, sweet, simple, positive. And for anyone that's got Calendly or any type of a schedule booking system, put that in every single email. And that way they can't say, well, I didn't know how to get a hold of you. I didn't know how to set up that meeting. I try to stay away from, I'm available next Monday at 3 or next Friday at 2 o'clock, because all of our schedules change from day to day. And back in the old days when I was still in sales, I would do that. But with Calendly and all these tools we have today, that's what I do. The other thing, one more tip that I want to share that Chris brought up a great point is, if you've been out of the office, I was out of the office 2 weeks. So I might say, hey, Joe, I've been out of the office for a couple of weeks. It'd be great to reconnect on what we were talking about. Here's my Calendly so we can sync up on a time again. Or I've been traveling. Sorry, I missed you. It'd be great to reconnect. So make it sound like we're the ones that are busy sometimes and that we miss them, instead of making it sound like they're the ones who are at fault, which they usually are, by the way. We know that, right? But we don't want people to feel icky about not calling us back. Any other questions? See if there's anything else in the chat. Okay. All right. If not, I will continue to the last couple pieces. Number 7, answer an objection with a question. Is an example that I have is if somebody says to you, Amy, your price is too high. Great. Chris, when you say my price is too high, can you tell me what you mean by that? Don't say anything. Be quiet. Chris might say, and I did have this happen, by the way, last year, a company that you're way more than we thought you were going to be. And I said those words. I said, I'm curious, Mike, when you say it's expensive or it's more than you thought it was going to be, can you tell me what do you mean by that? What did you have in mind? And listen to what they say. And it was funny because most of the time what happens is he said, oh, I have no idea. I didn't know how much, I've never looked at this type of work before. I didn't know how much it's going to cost. I'm just saying, I thought it was a lot more than I thought it was going to be. Oh, okay. But and then he said, but we're interested. We want to do this. We just got to figure out how to make it work. And I was like, whew. So ask those questions. What do you mean by that? Can you clarify in comparison to what? And they might say, well, we're looking at other speakers, or I don't know. I have a friend in the business and he only charges, who knows? There could be a million reasons why they're telling you your price is high, but ask them why they're saying that. Don't be afraid to ask those questions, because you'll get it out on the table. And number 8, show empathy that you care about the objection. Stay focused, stay confident, and be yourself. Show them that you can handle it. I think that objections can rock our world if we let them. I think the more objections we get, the more we're in this business, whether it's, again, entrepreneur, speaker, consultant, sales professional, whatever our role is in this audience today, the more we're in it and the more we practice these, the easier it gets. I do remember a time in my life when I would get an objection and be like, oh no, what am I going to do now? I'm going to lose the sale. But if you really think about it as a question, and if you follow these tips I shared, you will be a master at handling objections. And you will always remember that these are just questions. That's all these really are. Because if they weren't interested, again, they would say no, they would delete your email, they would ghost you. There's other ways people can say no without saying no. So that's the wrap on the objection. So again, I want to open it up and see if anybody has any questions or even any comments about objections from this conversation. Going once, going twice. Going 3 times. Okay.
I'll jump in, Amy. Hey, it's Jeff Rogers.
Hi, Jeff.
You can see me on your screen. Real quick, what's an objection that you did not successfully sort of convert? What was something that did sort of that you said, yeah, this isn't for me? What does that look like in your world?
Yeah, it is a great question. I think part of one that I had recently where we mutually agreed it wasn't really going to be a good fit for us to work together. And this is again why, and I forgot to ask the one question in the beginning in that discovery meeting, who else will be involved in this decision-making process? And it happened to be a company. I was talking to the VP of sales. He was a guy I worked with many years ago at another company, and he went to some other company. And the objection was really what happened is that he didn't tell me that they had that the sales training team was going to be involved. He made it sound like, well, I'm going to make the decision and they're not going to be involved. Well, guess who ended up getting involved in the decision? And guess who might be a little bit threatened to have another sales trainer consultant come in when this is like, their territory. So the objection was really just about, we don't really need this right now because we can handle it, even though between all of us, and I won't mention the company, if they could handle it, they probably would have handled it by now and gotten done what they needed done, but they didn't. So sometimes an objection might come from not having everybody at the table during the discussion. And that would be one example. And I decided I didn't want that opportunity. It would have been great. But again, if it's going to be a hostile work environment and I'm going to be dealing with these two people from the training department and they don't want me involved, is that something I really want to be a part of? No. So we mutually agreed. He called me back and said, hey, I think we're going to have them work on it. And I was almost like, hallelujah, because I don't think this would have been a good fit for us. As far as other objections, I think, the pricing objection is probably the number one I hear the most. And as I said, with pricing, tell me, what, when you say it's expensive, can you tell me what you mean by that? But they're really lately, I can't think of any other objections, but most of the time what happens in my world is there's somebody in the company that's involved in training that is, comes to the table at the 11th hour and they're going to shoot everything down. That's probably the one that I also run into the most.
And so what do you do with that?
Yeah, so what I do with that is I am doing better quality. What I'm doing now today is, how am I pivoting forward from that situation so I don't have that happen in every opportunity is I'm changing my market more to companies that really want to elevate success and, accelerate sales and performance, and they don't have anybody in-house that can do that. Whereas sometimes in the past, I would talk to companies and they had somebody, but it wasn't working. So I've really made that pivot as far as my strategy goes.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Mark, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you. Good stuff. Appreciate all the insight here.
Thank you.
It isn't so much a question, but it's a comment based on experience back to the notion of asking questions. In addition to asking questions, just to control to get the right answers, you can control a conversation with anyone by always ending what you say with a question. You can do this with your kids. You could do it with family members. You could do it in a professional environment as well. And the other thing that I have found that works very well is never ask a question that asks for a yes or no answer. Always ask how, what, who.
Mhm.
Yeah, just my thoughts.
Yeah, I thank you for sharing that, because with this one, it's really about like asking open-ended questions. And I saw in the chat, one of those questions that I saw Sima, great statement is tell me more about that. That's a great thing to ask. Great nugget there that she shared in the chat. So to what Mark said is ask the open-ended questions. Like when the whole pricing thing, when you say expensive, can you tell me, what do you mean by that? That's a great way to win. And you can really, one of the things that's really awesome about asking questions is that the more you ask people questions, and whether it's, again, a meeting planner or a business opportunity, whatever it might be, is that people really love to talk. And the more you can get that other person talking, maybe it's an interview, whatever it might be, but the more they talk, the more they often will sell the solution to themselves. And the more I sit back and don't say as much, the more they feel heard and understood, and they're going to be more empowered to want to work with me. So this is why when I go on sales or appointments or discovery meetings, I want to be talking half the time, and I want them to be talking half the time. I don't want to talk the whole time. And like today, let's face it. Okay, yeah, I'm talking a lot today because I'm presenting, and you will do that too. But when it's in that dialogue, we really want to make sure that we're not talking the entire time.
Yeah, one of the things I remember many, many years ago, it was really a sage piece of advice. There's a biblical comparison to sales. Many sales have been killed by the jawbone of an ass because they talk too much rather than listening to the customer.
Love it. High five on that one. Thank you. Thank you. And Jeff, I see your hand is up again.
I did. You got me going now. Now I'm all about the questions.
Okay.
So you deal with a lot of corporate clients, and one of the things I find with corporate clients is the idea of the gatekeeper and having to, or a group of gatekeepers. You know, there's a team that's been put together, a committee that's going to present your idea to the leadership, or you're not going to be able to present to the leadership. You're not going to have that opportunity. I know we can all say, no, you have to get in there. You have to get in. That's great. The reality is there's a lot of companies that you're not going to have the opportunity to present to that C level. What do you do in those situations? Do you have something that you do? And my thinking is, how do you educate them to best present your concept or what your offering is to the decision maker, who you're not going to get the opportunity to spend the time on the phone or on the Zoom or in that situation?
Okay, great question. So couple different places I'll go with this one. Number one of the best pieces of advice I heard was from one of my mentors over the years. And he calls it prepare your witness. Prepare your witness. So even asking them, Chris, when you get in front of the board, what are you going to say? Chris is like, I don't know. Okay, well, let me help you prepare what to say. Okay, not that Chris would do that, but let's get this boiled down to one or two concrete sentences so that when you get in front of the board or the VP or whoever it might be, you can deliver that message correctly. So that is super important. And then the other side of this too is a lot of the times I come back to a lot of my selling to veto, again, my favorite principles here is create opportunities where they do not exist. Try to start these opportunities at the C-suite, at the C level, at the top of the organization. The worst thing that's going to happen is that they're going to ignore you, or they're going to send you down the ladder a little bit. But I try to get in up at the top in the beginning, because sometimes what happens is when we get in with low-level people, not that they're bad, but every organization has them. When I was in hospital sales, it was materials management. Tony calls it Linoleumville in his book. He has a lot of funny names for that. But part of the problem is that sometimes these people are called blockers. They can turn into blockers, and they don't want the sale to happen. They want to keep the status quo. They don't want to spend money. They don't want to see change happen. And we really want to make sure that we're not with them. So the biggest invitation I have is try to start at the top. And if you can't get to the top, try to go to the level right below. And if you still can't do that, then prepare the witness. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's great. I love that phrase, prepare the witness, because that's
right.
With these 20 and $30 billion corporations, it's difficult to get that time with leadership until after you've been vetted and approved. And so that idea of prepping them to be ready to go. Obviously, you want to get as high as you can on the food chain, but it's difficult to start at some of these super CEOs that run these major conglomerates in order to get a job at with Microsoft or with Google or with Apple or with Pfizer. It's going to be difficult to start at that CEO position, but preparing them to go have that conversation is great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Great feedback. Gregory, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, just a quick question. I've been listening to Anthony Sears in the UK, and I just want your opinion about this because I'm trying to figure out where I fit here. He says he never leaves voicemails for anybody. And he says what happens is, like, if I'm calling my friend Chris and I say, "Hey Chris, I want to get together with you for lunch," and then he doesn't respond, and I call him again and again and again and again, he calls it a negative anchor. And of course, he's a big NLP guy. And he says what happens is the person that has never talked to you starts thinking to themselves, "Oh, that pain in the ass Greg, I don't want to talk to him anymore." And so what he'll do is he won't leave a message, or if he does leave a message, it's so vague that it does create curiosity. So I don't know if I should be leaving messages or should I play the game that he's playing, but I just thought I'd ask you to weigh in on it.
Okay. I do leave messages. I do leave voice messages. I do get people to call me back. Does everybody call me back? No. But the reason that I leave the messages is that I think we as a society, we've kind of forgotten about, again, I got my phone timer here, but I think we have gotten so numbed by, emails, text messages, social media, that we've kind of forgotten to pick up the phone and call people and communicate. And I think the thing that's really cool about smartphones, I'll speak for iPhone at least, is when someone leaves you a voice message, it actually, will print out the message of what they said to you, so you don't even have to listen to it. So that's just my personal opinion. And then if I go back to my selling DeVito principles, Tony Parinello is always about leaving the voice message. If you were in my office, if you were in your office today to take this call, here's what I would have shared with you. I have an idea they could take your sales to X% this year. It'd be great to have a conversation about this. Here's how I can be reached. But just, something short, sweet, simple. But again, I'm always open to new ideas, and maybe leaving voice message might not be the way to go. So I'll leave it at that. But interesting perspective. Chris, I see you raising your hand.
Not so much with a question, but in this case, with a comment that you said something earlier that I think has had a big impact on Greg's question, which was that you use kind of a multi-channel approach to follow up, not always the same approach, one in, one out. So a voicemail here, a text there, which I think can go a long way to kind of mitigating that sense of raw repetition from the voice.
Right. I agree, 100%. It's just different channels, different, some of us are text senders, some of us are more phone people. And when I heard that factoid I shared earlier in this discussion today about, the 500 phone calls versus 500 LinkedIn messages, I read that a week ago and it was like someone dumped cold water over me. I'll be transparent. I hadn't been making as many calls lately. I was thinking that LinkedIn was the way to go. So I was doing a little more of that. But when I heard that person that made the calls got 40 appointments, yeah, that's a lot of calls to make. I agree, but it really made me wake up. So it's something that I'm making sure I'm making phone calls and not just sticking with LinkedIn or text messages or emails. Other questions or comments?
I think most people are afraid of the call and the phones, so we should keep this to ourselves. Don't let this leave the room. Don't you think most people hide behind email? I think they do.
I do too. Yeah, I agree with you. I think but I'll just be transparent. Last night when I was like looking over my notes for today, and I got distracted, I admit it. And I started cleaning up my email box. I mean, it was probably a half an hour and I still have more emails that need to be cleaned out. So I think there's something to be said that I think I'll speak for myself. I think we're getting a little anesthetized to the urgency of email because we get so much of it now. And I think between us, I think LinkedIn messaging is getting to be the same way. At one point, I think it was really hot and it worked. But I think now so many of us get bombarded by sales, not salespeople, but people who want to sell us something. That's why I kind of take that multi-prong approach, because some people want to be on the phone, some want to be on LinkedIn, some want to text. I mean, everyone's different. And that's the other reason I take that different 5-prong approach to it. It says companies are having to train new employees to not fear the phone. I get it. 100%.
One thing that never gets missed is a handwritten note and hand addressed to somebody.
Oh, that's right. Absolutely.
If
Sending,
you've got their address.
yeah, if you can get their address, absolutely. And you can go into someone's LinkedIn, you know, not to, well, here's something I do. I'll just give you another tip is I sometimes will go into someone's LinkedIn profile. Sometimes people will put their phone numbers in there. And that's how the person that was supposed to call me this week who hasn't called me back yet, that's how I got his information. Now, he doesn't know that. And I'm not going to tell him, but I'll tell you as my friends, sometimes you can go into people's contact information and they will have their phone or their personal email in that if you go into LinkedIn. Seeing if there's anything else I'm missing. Or a FedEx, UPS, they open those right away. Love that. Okay, see if there's any other. Okay, other questions or comments?
This has been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm so glad you joined. Thank you for being here. And Chris, I know looking at the clock, I know we're kind of in the wrap up networking piece. So just do you want to wrap this up or is there anything else that you'd like to share? I'll turn it back over to you.